No a la guerra, or no to war. That's been the message from Spain during the Iran war. It's made Madrid one of the clearest voices in Europe, firmly rejecting getting involved. But it's a position that has put Spain at odds, not only with the US, but also with some of its European partners. Take a listen to how Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, outlined the reasons for his government's position.
Firstly, no to the breakdown of international law that protects us all, especially the most defenceless, the civilian population. Secondly, no to assuming that the world can only solve its problems through conflicts and bombs. And finally, no to repeating the mistakes of the past. In short, the Spanish government's position can be summed up in 4 words: no to the war.
It was a statement that came after President Trump lashed out at Spain's government for its refusal to allow the US to use bases in Spain for its strikes on Iran.
And now Spain actually said that we can't use their bases, and that's all right. We could use their base if we want. We could just fly in and use it. Nobody's going to tell us not to use it, but we don't have to. But they were unfriendly, and as you know, they were the only country that in NATO would not agree to go up to 5%. I don't think they would have agreed to go up to anything. They wanted to keep it at 2%, and they don't pay the 2%. So we're going to cut off all trade with Spain. We don't want anything to do with Spain.
So why is Spain so clear in its opposition to the Iran war, while other big European nations struggle to define their own positions? We're going to unpack that with David Jiménez Torres, Professor of History at the Complutense University in Madrid. He's going to help us understand what lies beneath this decision and what it reveals about Spain's evolving foreign policy identity.
I do think that the Spanish position in this conflict, whatever its merits on its own are, is driven by that interest on the part of Pedro Sánchez, because he knows that opposing Donald Trump and opposing the attack against Iran is something that plays very well with his base, which has become rather demobilized over the past couple of years. So there is the international dimension, of course, but domestic politics are also very important in this context.
In his statements, Pedro Sánchez has referred back to the Iraq War, saying Europe must avoid repeating past mistakes. So how much do the events of 2003 still shape Spanish political identity and public sentiment on foreign intervention?
It was absolutely no accident that Pedro Sánchez self-consciously referred back to the Iraq War and Spain's support of the US-led invasion. This is something that was very unpopular at the time. Also among conservative voters. That was, in a way, one of the most noteworthy aspects of mobilization against Spanish support for the Iraq War. That is something that galvanized both the left and the right in Spain. It's questionable whether it can have a similar effect now.
Pedro Sánchez has stressed the importance of respecting international law as a key reason for Spain's opposition to this war. He's been a frequent critic of the Israeli government, and that has often put him at odds with other European nations.
It is coherent with its previous stance on other issues. At the same time, it has become quite clear that all of the positionings, all of the Spain's positions in these international issues are taken with an eye towards domestic politics. And again, in the context of a weak prime minister who's trying to boost his popularity. And I think both elements need to be reconciled to understand that situation. That said, I mean, it's of course true that this U.S. intervention, in the same way as prior U.S. interventions, is not popular. It's interesting, there's been polling done in the last few days that shows that while opposition to the Iraq war was quite wide and cut through the right and left divide, in this case, conservative voters are much more likely to support or to look favorably upon the intervention in Iran than they were in 2003 when it came to supporting the Iraq war.
Another aspect is Spain's firm refusal to raise defence spending to meet a demand from the Trump administration for NATO members. All part of a deliberate strategy, says David Jiménez Torres.
It's also important to stress that Sánchez has, in a way, been looking for some type of public confrontation with Donald Trump for a while now. And one good example was Spain's quite public reticence towards increasing its in spending on defense within the context of the wider NATO alliance. This is something that the government very self-consciously tried to put forward. Because it did want to, in a way, be the lone voice or one of the lone voices in Spain that was seen as, in Europe, that was seen as standing up to American demands and particularly Donald Trump's demands of its NATO allies.
So how much of the Spanish government's approach is substance and how much is strategy?
There's been quite a few statements about how the Spanish government is going to continue considering the United States as an ally. I mean, there's while there may be a public posturing and criticism against the United States, there is also very much no desire to break off relations or particularly to do anything related to the U.S. military bases in Spanish territory. It's more an argument about what kind of uses they can be put to. But there seems to be a kind of studied gray area that the Spanish government is trying to find between opposing Donald Trump rhetorically, but also trying to not provoke a more substantive reaction. So, for example, the government has been explicit in saying that it doesn't believe that Spain will be punished either through new tariffs or through a trade war or through any other type of retaliation as a result of its posture on Iran. So, in a way, it's saying that you can oppose Donald Trump again, rhetorically, but not do so enough to trigger real consequences.
Spain also clearly feels EU membership offers some level of protection from potential consequences of pushing back against the Trump administration.
The fact that, in a way, Spain has the backing or is protected by the umbrella of the European Union. And I think that is part of this calculation that I was referring to of how you can rhetorically oppose Donald Trump while also maintaining, in statements towards the Spanish population that the Spanish economy will not be affected by this, will not be damaged by this. So I think that calculation of how any trade repercussions would take place or would be protected by the EU umbrella is definitely part of the equation. Even with that EU protection, there are still things that the United States government could do to damage Spanish economic interests. For example, Spanish companies that operate in the United States. So I do think it is a perilous gamble, but at the same time, it does seem that the Spanish government seems somewhat comfortable with the calculations that it has made.
So is it a calculated risk? And is Spain operating from a position of comfort?
I think the risks are that the country gets, in a way, cut out from the principal decision-making, structures, informal structures, mind you, within the European Union. So, as you know, the issue of defense spending is not just a matter of pleasing the White House. It's also about how Europe in general responds to the Russian threat and to Russian aggression and to the war in Ukraine. Sanchez has played with the fact that because Spain is so geographically distant from Russia, the Spanish population definitely doesn't feel the threat posed by Russia in the same way that other European countries do. I do think there is a particular risk of then Spain not having a real voice when it comes to taking the important decisions that need to be made at the continental level. So not sitting at the same table as, say, Germany or France or the UK or other countries which may have shown a stronger commitment towards the resolving the continent's issues in a way that is not solely determined by domestic political calculations. It is playing upon tensions that actually exist within European societies and within European institutions. So there was a real debate about what European countries needed to do about the war in Gaza, in the same way that there is a real European debate about what European countries need to do now as regards the US and Israeli attack on Iran.
David Jimenez Torres sees a possibility that Spain's foreign policy positioning could have upsides, but also downsides for the future.
I think the question is whether the Spanish position can help the EU arrive at a fuller, comprehensive position on these matters, or whether it just exacerbates these divisions that already exist within European institutions and among the different European countries. One of the ways in which Spanish politics tried to become normalized after the transition to democracy was to become a very staunch supporter of international institutions, particularly because it had been left out of them during the Franco dictatorship. Once it entered the European Union, it became fervently pro-European.
So just how significant is this moment?
I can't really remember another time, though, when a Spanish government so self-consciously tried to differentiate itself, particularly from, if you want, the three major European players, France, Germany, and Britain, as in this current case. So we might be seeing something of a divergence from what has been the general international outlook of Spanish governments since the transition to democracy. I also wonder what will happen if this war maybe comes to a finish in a couple of weeks, whether Spain will, in a way, go back to trying to follow the position that France and Germany particularly follow in EU matters and in continental matters.
Do you agree? Let us know what you think in the comments below. I'm Pablo Foley-Elias. Thanks for your company. Until next time, take care.